Hey there, everybody. Got the scarf on. You know what that means. Classic overdue Doctor Who review. As I usually do when I do these, this was put to a vote on my Patreon. I decided I was overdue to take in a first Doctor story, and they decided that I should watch The Aztecs. Now, The Aztecs is, of course, one that I was aware of. It's one that it tends to come up at a lot of lists of some of the better First Doctor stories. I've seen some people say that it is their favorite First Doctor story. And it's one of those ones that I look at it and go, if I work really hard to project myself into the time that it was made, it's really good. Unfortunately, there are a lot of issues, and they're not my usual ones, which tend to be more issues of, sometimes I take issue with the production. Production's really solid on this. Sometimes I, take issue with some of the concepts. The core concepts are okay on this, but I don't know how else to put this. It's really patronizing and has the colonialist mentality very evident in the writing. So this is a story where the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan, my God, why couldn't I think of her name for a minute? Well, I know why I couldn't think of her name. I'll mention this now because I might forget later. They had no idea what to do with Susan in this episode. They literally shuffle her off to have private lessons for a big chunk of this story. So that's why I couldn't remember Susan. But anyway, the four of them land, and they're not entirely sure where they are. It turns out that they are in an Aztec temple. And when they emerge from it, the door closes behind them, and now they can't get back in because it can only be opened from the inside. And Barbara puts on this little sort of trinket that she finds, and she is then mistaken for a reincarnation of a god, because the person who was buried there was the previous incarnation, or believed to be. And the reason that that room was set up the way it was, that it could be exited from within, is because the presumption was when that person was reborn, they would exit. And they need to be able to do that. And so now Barbara is in a position where she's being both worshipped as a god and also having her godhood questioned by, depending on who she is interacting with, because some of the people have a reason to, question what she is asking them to do, because amongst other things, Barbara has a love of the history of the Aztec people, but she's got big personal issues with the whole human sacrifice thing that they had a tendency to do. So she goes into this whole thing on a mission, basically saying, well, if they think I'm a god and that I'm somebody who they need to obey, I can just make them stop. And the Doctor says, no, you can't just do that. That's not how that's not right to do, and that's not how this works. You cannot do that kind of change to the timeline. She tries anyway. Surprise, it doesn't work. When I mentioned sort of the patronizing colonialist viewpoint, the overall tone of this thing is very reminiscent of the "Oh, the noble savage" sort of thing. There is some praising of the ingenuity of the Aztecs, but they are never far away from pointing out, yeah, but they do human sacrifices, and really such a shame. They should have been more civilized, kind of a thing going on. And there's other aspects to that as well. You've got Ian ends up sort of running afoul of this warrior, and amongst other things, kind of humiliating the guy when he uses a pressure point to basically incapacitate the guy briefly to say, I can beat you with my thumbs. I'm like, Ian, look, I understand that you're capable of that, but you're kind of being a jerk, and I don't know why you're being a jerk about this. And then the doctor actually ends up in a bit of a romantic pairing, which is really odd for me to see in classic era. But he has these interactions with this woman trying to learn more about the temple so that they can figure out how to get in there and get the TARDIS again. But he has nice interactions with her and he enjoys time with her, and then he very inadvertently, accidentally, basically has what is effectively the Aztec equivalent of a marriage proposal ceremony with her without realizing that's what he did. And then, he realizes, he's like, oh. And that was kind of cute. I don't take a massive issue with Barbara being taken for a godly figure. Now, that might surprise some people, given that I did take very big issue with that over on the Council of Geeks when I reviewed a Doctor Who novel called The Good Doctor, which had a similar plot, but here's the difference. And this is always important because, this is where the key difference is between doing the worst version of a trope and doing a version of a trope. I'm like, okay. What I couldn't stand about The Good Doctor were things like everyone, right off the bat, believed. And the way that this religion had developed, it just immediately made, in that case, Graham, 13th Doctor companion, into a godly figure that nobody questioned, nobody had any real doubts about. It kind of insulted the intelligence of the faithful. The very concept of being faithful, made you stupid. Why I'm more okay with it here is, while there is the base level similar thing of the trope being, she shows up and they mistake her for a god, it doesn't ever come across like it's because they're stupid. It's because she, in a surprisingly precise way, matched what their belief said would happen. So it's not just a case of, oh, you came from the heavens, you must be a god, sort of thing. It's like, no, you very specifically came out of that specific tomb wearing that specific item. Yeah. And the other thing, not everyone believes her right off. Now, granted, it's the villains who don't, which is actually kind of interesting because oftentimes having to accept that this person is not a god is something that the more protagonistic characters need to do. And it's the people who are holding on to that belief too tightly that are usually the problems in these kinds of stories. Not the case here. It's the guy who doubts her because he doesn't like what she's saying, and even before she starts really laying down commands that he's like, what? He's immediately questioning her. So not everyone's taking it for granted. It doesn't treat belief like a defect. That's why I'm okay with it here. That said, the colonialist overtones are thick in this. And if you can get past that, it's pretty well structured, it's pretty well paced, it's pretty well acted. They didn't know what to do with Susan. Like I said, she is such a third wheel in this thing, to a degree that I don't think I've seen of her yet. I've seen her used poorly in stories where she mostly screams, but even in those stories, at least she's doing something. Here, they literally find an excuse to just send her off somewhere and like, oh, well, we know she's doing that. We don't have to think about her. Like, she pops up briefly towards the end again, but she's basically just not there. So clearly they had no idea what to do with her. But everything else is as solid as I would have expected a 1960s British show tackling this kind of subject to be, and take that as implying all the asterisks that you can think of, because that's basically what I'm doing. Putting it into the context of when it was made and by whom, it's pretty good. But accepting that context also means accepting that there's some really troublesome concepts and notions and implications and ways of viewing other people who, aren't white Europeans, that kind of makes you go, It's not horrible, but at best it's patronizing. So that's the Aztecs. Pretty good. Some inherent baked-in issues that, we're going to be there regardless of execution. And the execution's good. There just are these underlying problems. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff, you know what it is. Like, subscribe. I got a Patreon. Links to other things down in the description. All sorts of stuff like that. No pressure, though. Don't worry about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break.